Morning, folks. We're doing some more painting today. I'm trying to find. Right on. So the reason I've kept it in the vertical orientation is if we flip to like hand cam, we're just painting. I can't change from horizontal to vertical midstream. So this is like the if people are on their phones, convenient way to make it work. And if people are not on their phones, well, they can just kind of deal. They're going to have a bigger screen to live with anyway. We're painting today the Zombicide Monty Python kits. So there is Bob and Montalban, and then Gilbert and Mortimer as well. And you can see their sort of hero art on the sides. Bob is the one that I have the most progress on. You can see him here. He needs a little bit of cleanups, and then just some refinements on the accessories aren't really painted in just yet, but he's getting there. So he's probably our first priority. I also wanted to show this thing off. So this is like a little like vending capsule. You would like stick toys and stuff in there. I'm testing these with my little homemade miniatures vending machine. I'm trying to see if the size is sufficient. The main problem I have with stuff like this is they don't often account for the bases. So this one is a flat style. So if I use a smaller base, like a 25 mil base, it usually fits. But like this Chapel Road, you can see she's a little too tall. But it does fit our little peanut cats. My wife recently painted this one for me. This is a spaceship peanut cat. Hey there, welcome in. So yeah, the theory is that you could fit, one or two of these in there and then pop them in a little vending machine at the painting takes as like a tip jar. So we'll see how that pans out. But there's some guy online who's made like fully 3D printable vending machines, so that's my next project when I find time. But until then, let's get started on our painting here. Welcome in, everybody, and we're going to start with let's see if we get it in the light here. So Bob is the one that I have the most progress on. These are Zombicide miniatures, and so I'm also going to start laying in the contrasting colors, the blue and the green for Montalban and Gilbert respectively. So let's start with Gilbert here. I'm going to try to angle this down a bit more so you can see more what's happening. So for Gilbert's blue, it's a pretty rich blue. It's not that vibrant. My gut tells me that this dark blue-gray might be a little too dark, but that this standard blue is a little overkill. So we'll start here and then work our way brighter if we need to. And so we'll get a couple drops of this out here on our palette. This is a little homemade wet palette. It's nothing fancy. It's just a takeout lid with paper towel and a piece of parchment paper. The parchment sort of controls the flow of moisture and temperature, keeps the paint wet a little bit longer so it doesn't dry out. And now we're going to find Mr. Gilbert here. And if we look at the art, the shield is cut from the top corner on a diagonal. And he also has blue trace work on the edge of his outfit. So we'll start with the shield. And he's, of course, holding it in a different position than the art, which is nice and fun. I'm just going to lay this in. I'm kind of going off of the point of the fleur-de-lis that's sculpted onto the shield to give me that dividing line. And just in there. Right, so you can see right away we're already building that separation. If you're just getting into miniatures as a hobby, stuff like Zombicide, where it's a self-contained board game, is a great way to get access to a lot of miniatures pretty affordably and to not have to assemble anything. All of the Zombicide stuff comes pre-built. Most of it comes pre-colored, so the heroes and the zombies will be two separate colors. This way, even if you haven't painted yet, you can play pretty conveniently. The detail on them is good, but not great. Um, but that just means that they're like pretty beginner friendly overall. All right, so just laying that blue in. Thank you everyone for being here on a Saturday morning. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know. This is what I do. I just paint. I mostly host like beginner friendly painting events in my area. But you can't do that every day. And so sometimes I come on here and just, you know, try to have that communication with folks anyway, get them excited about the hobby and get them working on projects of their own. So we've got that first chunk of blue laid in. Now I'm going to take a minute and try to figure out if the blue that remains on it is just the very bottom edge or if it's the interior flap. The art's a little, I don't know that it's inconsistent, but it's a little unclear. I think it's just the outside um, exterior edge. So I don't think it goes on this interior fold. I think it's more of like an applique. And there's a little bit of a ledge sculpted on there, so I'm probably going to start by pulling that out, and then we'll see where it goes. And so we're just going to take the edge of our brush, try to catch that ledge. And that's already starting to look about right. Wonderful. Just slowly working our way around. So, do any of you have any model painting projects of your own right now? It can be an interesting hobby because there's so much overlap with other activities. For most people, it's not their primary hobby. They'll paint because they like to build Gundams, or they'll paint because they do dollhouses and dioramas or historical displays. For me, at this point, painting is my primary activity, and then I'll just take what I paint and repurpose it for tabletop gaming when I can, whether that's RPGs, board games, miniatures games. I like to have a hobby that makes me feel like I've, made something at the end of my time. Just keep working our way around the outside here. For anybody in Florida, tomorrow at around 3 o'clock, I'll be over at Flashpoint Comics in Winter Springs doing a big community painting event as part of their 1 year uh, store anniversary. So we're going to have fantasy, sci-fi, and sort of superhero figures that people can paint. And it should be a good time. There's also going to be like comic book artists there. Uh, they typically have local music. I don't know if that's happening tomorrow or not, but Danny always has a pretty good time when he has people over for events like that. Also, my favorite local pizza place is over on that side of town, so that's going to work out nicely. So something about these zombicide figures, and I'm not complaining because I can't do better, but it is like an honest thing to note is that sometimes like the actual molding and casting of them isn't super crisp. So it's not just a mold line that you're fighting, but sometimes the the cut on the fabric doesn't seem exactly perpendicular, and so you get these weird little edges that you can snag on. Um, Not a big deal, but something to be mindful of if you're like me and you use the edge of your brush a lot to kind of steer the paint. You might snag on some weird lumps and bumps along the way and have to course correct. Okay, and so there's our blue trim laid in. It's a little dark right now. We'll have to punch up the vibrancy, but it's in the right place, and that's that's the first problem. Same thing. I'll go back and put a second coat on the shield here now. Just make sure we got a nice even bright coat. Alrighty. So that's the dryer. Sorry about that. A couple other things that need their initial base coat. We need the leather gloves that he's wearing. The back of the shield needs some kind of color. I'll probably. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it in the blue to give him a pop of color from behind, and then just have the white front of the shield be only partial. I haven't decided just yet. But the gloves and the plume on his helm both need a bit more color. So let's lay in the shield first because it's going to be harder to reach later once we start painting the gloves. Just doesn't have to be anything too fancy, just a nice even layer back there. For the plumage, it looks more like a red brown. So mahogany is probably my best bet to start from. This is mahogany here. By the way, today I'm using the Pro Acryl. They're very flat acrylic paints, which is cool. They're mostly just what I have on the desk. Um, you can see in the background up there, there's a bunch of different brands of paint. There's Army Painter, there's Two Thin Coats. I'll use pretty much anything, and so I've accidentally accumulated a lot of paint. So I try to make sure that I mix up which paints I'm using on a given day or a given project, just to keep all the paint mixed up well and use anything before it expires. All right. Yeah. A little straighten out. Wonderful. So I'm gonna do this over the plume as well as the leather gloves, and then we'll differentiate them with the shading and highlight. We'll actually make the plume darker, probably with a wash or a recess shade, and the gloves will probably lighten up to give a more worn leather look with that sort of like pale, almost gray, the way that leather kind of strains and cracks as it shrinks and ages. Weird little stuff like the feathers like this, you got to take your time because there's a bunch of little nooks and crannies, and you don't want to miss a spot and then have it stick out later as unpainted. Just take my time, make sure I flip the figure around a couple different directions so that I'm seeing each surface of the feathers, able to access them easily. Nice. YouTube is asking me if I would like a Q&A poll. Let's, sure. Chat filters. It offered it and then it took it away. Well, if it comes back, we'll do it. But for now, I'm here. You're here. Thanks for being here. We're just painting today. If you've got questions, put them in the little chat feature. If not, just hang out. I'm gonna full steam ahead on this. One of the things that I really enjoy about this activity is the way that even small amounts of effort are sort of immediately rewarded, right? Something as simple as painting the glove now makes the pommel and the grip of the sword stand out by contrast. And even though they're unpainted yet, the figure already has more definition, and so it looks more visually appealing to the eye. It's during the painting process, if you're doing a lot of complex highlights and layers, you can go through like an ugly phase where everything is sort of flat and uninteresting. But even the basics really do just kind of bring out the work that the sculptor put in to give you these interesting little characters. And then we've got one more glove on the back here, as well as these little leather straps securing the shield to the arm. I'm also going to use a little bit more of this mahogany to define the boots behind the shin guard. If we look on the back, there is a seam there. I don't think it's um, armored in, like, it's not encapsulated in armor. So at minimum, there's some straps, but I think the the texture is implying that it's actually a boot on the back, not a fully enclosed piece of armor. I generally work with my paint fairly thin, which means over something like the mahogany or over the silver undercoat that I had put on, I may need a couple extra layers to build up opacity. If you're doing it just over white or black, you may not have that issue, but I don't want any of the reflective quality of the silver undercoat to come through. So I gotta be a little bit more careful. If you've never painted something like this before, I mean, this figure is just short of an inch and a half tall. A lot of people's first impulse is to go find the smallest brush that they can find. Something like this, where it basically comes to a two or three eyelash hairs. I actually almost never use something this small. The real sort of workhorse brushes for me are stuff like this. These are watercolor style size 5 and size 3 brushes. I want a brush that's gonna kind of taper off. It's gonna have a wider belly and then come to a nice tip. A brush like that is gonna control the moisture of the paint a lot better. It's gonna stop me from having to reapply paint from the palette as often, and it's gonna stop the paint from drying out while it's still in my brush. It's gonna keep the brush cleaner, and it's gonna reduce any unwanted textures translating onto the figure, as dry paint can kind of impart a lumpy texture onto your finished design. So we just work our way around the figure. All of these weird underside areas are always kind of a pain to paint. They don't add a lot visually. But it's still important to just kind of carry your level of detail all the way through the piece. Whether that's not very much detail or just color separation, keeping it consistent is going to give it a really grounded look. Same thing, we'll just get the side of each boot as well. If this is your first time seeing miniature painting as like even a thing you can do, right, as something that people do for a hobby, um, it can be a bit intimidating to start because the supplies can be expensive and it can be, you need a whole lot of little things. So if you get interested in doing something like this, go find your local comic book store, your local board game shop, anywhere that has stuff like BattleTech, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons. They're gonna have paint, and they're gonna probably do painting activities at the store at free or low cost. Play with their stuff first. Don't go and buy a bunch of expensive paint right off the rip. Because if you do have a bad experience or you decide, I don't have the time for this, I don't have the space to do this at home, you're saving yourself a bunch of money and hurt feelings. Welcome in. Thanks for being here today. Alrighty. So, now Mr. Mortimer here, or sorry, this is Gilbert. He needs a couple things. One, we need to punch up the ivory color on the vestment. He also needs a belt. I'll probably do that in the same mahogany brown to keep things simple. And then he also needs his facial hair. Right now it's kind of overpainted in silver, but he has a pretty big mustache if I remember correctly. So we'll have to get that in there. There is unfortunately like a mold marking from the fabrication on his face, which I wasn't able to remove without damaging the face. Unfortunate, but it does happen sometimes. Let's work on punching up that ivory color first, and the shield will also need an undercoat for the white. I'll probably use the bright warm gray here from, again, Pro. But let's punch up this ivory, and he's also sort of the test subject, as both Montauban and Mortimer also have that same sort of ivory cream color as the basic shared color for their equipment. So I'm going to be trying it with, it says olive flesh. I'm going to try and use that as my sort of neutral starting coat. I did put some basic color on here already with some speed paint over the zenithal highlight. I used, I believe, Howling Sand speed paint, maybe mixed with a little skeleton bone. So there are tones there. Unfortunately, the opacity isn't very great. And so I'm going to attempt to just use the olive flesh as a highlight, and we'll see if that kind of buys us enough coverage and brightness. If not, the whole of the vestment may get painted in this olive flesh color, and then we'll have to put in new shadows from scratch, which is kind of, it's not a problem, but I hate to have to paint the same thing twice, especially on a job that's for somebody else. I don't mind torturing myself, but you know, I try to get people their stuff in a timely manner when I can. I think the contrast is probably too great, which means we will likely be just repainting this. Well, if that's the case, let's rip off the band-aid here and just Just build up that even coat. It's unfortunate to lose the prep work that I did with the speed paint, but not really unexpected because I could see that it wasn't really as even or opaque as I needed it to be. I do now have to be careful to not hit the blue trim that we just spent so much time repainting. But just slowly work our way around the figure. Do our best to not make too much of a mess of this. All right. Well, it's happening. No big deal. Hey there, welcome in. We're just putting some base coats on Zombicide figures today. If you have a painting project of your own to chat about, I'd love to hear about it. But otherwise, just thanks for being here. We'll give the stream a few more minutes. If it doesn't pick up again, we'll start watching the Flesh and Blood tournament instead. All right, folks. I think that's about enough streaming for me today. Um, Thank you for being here. For those of you who were here, if this gets posted, thanks for watching it later. I don't know why you would, but what do I know? I'm just a guy. Thanks. Have a good one.